Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my tree. Episode 144, Star of Hope. In 2022, it marked 150 years since the chance discovery of the Holtermann Nugget, found in 1872 at the Star of Hope gold mine in Helene, New South Wales. As manager of the Star of Hope mine, German migrant and prospector Bernhardt Otto Holtermann was credited with the discovery. Bernhardt Otto Holtermann was born on the 29th of April 1838 in Hamburg, the son of John Henry Holtermann and his wife Anna Nugget. Not wishing to spend 3 years in military service, he left Germany in 1858, sailed from Liverpool on the Salem and reached Melbourne on the 7th of August, and he went on to Sydney in the city of Sydney, arriving on the 12th of August. There he hoped to meet his brother Herman, but found that he'd gone to the goldfields. Unsuccessful in gaining any job on land through his lack of English, Holtermann sailed on the 13th of September as a steward in the schooner Rebecca for the Pacific Islands, and returned to Sydney on the 20th of January 1859. He became a waiter at the Hamburg Hotel, where a successful miner almost induced him to go to Adelong. He worked at the Hamburg Hotel for about 5 months, and during this time he met up with a Polish miner named Ludwig Hugo Louis Byers. Byers was enthusiastic about moving to the goldfields, and he convinced Holtermann to join him. He went with him to the Tambaroora Highland area. In 1861, they formed a partnership and began prospecting on Hawkins Hill and at Tambaroora. However, riches were not immediate, resulting in more partners being brought in to bolster the finances. For 5 years, they had little success. In order to hold the claim, Holtermann was forced to undertake a variety of occupations, including a ferryman, working in a hotel, and being the owner of a hotel, the All Nations Hotel, for a year. Once he nearly lost his life through a premature explosion of blasting powder. On the 22nd of February 1868, he and Byers married the sisters Harriet and Mary Emmett from a well-known local family. It was about this time that Holtermann also met up with his brother, who joined them at their mine, the Star of Hope. Holtermann by now was the mine manager as well as one of the major financial partners. Holtermann became committed to assisting the community with donations to the Temperance League and to assist in establishing the local school. Around September 1868, their mine cut into a vein full of gold. Holtermann continued in the partnership while others took their finds and left. In 1871, some rich veins were found, but they petered out. But the next year, one of the 8 owners sold his share to Mark Hammond, who without authority sealed off the shaft and began a new drive to the west. Rich new veins were immediately encountered, but Hammond had sold out at a substantial profit before the 19th and 20th of October. At 2 a.m. on the 19th of October 1872, the last explosion for that shift revealed the world's largest specimen of reef gold. Holtermann, being the manager, was summoned, and he realised its importance and had the rock removed as one piece. Eventually it was crushed to reveal the precious metal, but not before a photographer, Merlin, took a photograph of the complete rock. This image shows Holtermann proudly standing by his nugget. The Holtermann Nugget is the single largest gold mass ever discovered. Whether it's technically a nugget remains a bit controversial. One characteristic of a nugget is that it has left the lode at some point in the past and is no longer within the host rock. In other words, it's broken off from the original lode of gold and been carried away by water or erosion. The Holtermann Nugget was what was called reef gold, that is, a whole section of a quartz reef. It weighed in at a massive 285 kilograms. It was a mixture of gold, quartz and slate. It stood 144.8 centimetres high and was 66 centimetres wide. 93.2 kilograms of pure gold was extracted from the specimen, worth about $8 million in today's money. Their success, plus the success of others, attracted Sydney speculators.
Holtermann cautioned people of Sydney about shady speculators on the 20th of November 1871. In the Sydney Morning Herald it says to the editor of the Herald, "Sir, herewith I beg of you for the information of the public at large to insert these few lines." Noticing in several newspapers so many accounts or reports from Hill End, and even telegrams which are but founded on some very slight or unsafe foundation, or mistakes, who knows which, I feel it is my duty as one of a large company to state a little about these so well blown about goldfields as Hill End. I would advise no one to buy in any claim or lease without him being acquainted with the party selling, or has someone responsible on the spot to refer to, or who the purchaser can depend on. If not, he had better spend a few pounds and look for himself. Do not fancy that the whole of Hill End or Tambaroora are going to turn out to be rich or fortune claims. It has never been, and is not likely it will be the case, more so the way it goes ahead now, because a man need only go and take up a lease, never mind where, blow well and misrepresent the same, and he can raise plenty of money. Never mind if it turns out to be a grain of gold, it fetches money to Hill End. But how long? Not for many months, because the paying parties, not the sleeping shareholders, will get tired and give their interests up, run the whole place down to be no good, and all because they're in a hurry and leaping without noticing how deep the pond may be. Everything is represented in sunshine, and the whole cry is, if we only get the money to sink deep enough, who knows how deep? They might never be deep enough and get broke before they get to the end of the shallow. As many places such as Trunkie have fallen to the ground through going too hot for work, our Hill End and Tambaroora, I am afraid, will do the same to a great extent through being forced into the public. It will stand for years on its own merits if left to the same, and I hope that speculators who might lose money at Hill End will not complain, as they have been sufficiently warned. Several claims are really rich, but how far the richness runs along no one can tell, and where it is to be found no one knows. The old digger knows no more than a new chum in regard to where the gold is in the ground. I saw a man who left Hill End on Thursday this morning, and he, besides a telegram from same place, which I received yesterday at dinner time, stated to me that no new heavy finds have been unearthed as to the so well-known Hill End as reported this week. Hoping my statement will not be considered out of call, I remain yours obediently, B. O. Holtermann, prospector at Hawkins Hill, Hill End, Tarragon Hotel, Sydney, 18th of November. When copies of the paper reached Hill End, he was burnt in effigy. This wasn't a good move for Holtermann, as he was trying to gain election within his electorate, and there was strong movement against this to undermine him. He was not elected at this time, missing out just by a few votes. Even though Holtermann's public works and profile was positive, it did bring on malicious attacks from others, seemingly because he was different, he spoke with a German accent, and he had entrepreneurial ideas and become a leading figure. Later returned to public favour and became a founding member of the first Hill End Borough Council. In February 1872, the two senior partners, Beyer and Holtermann, floated the Byers and Holtermann Star of Hope Gold Mining Company Limited. In March 1872, an advertisement appeared in the Hill End and Tambaroora Times announcing the arrival from Sydney of the American and Australasian Photographic Company, A&A. Henry Beaufoy Merlin had moved to Hill End and announced that they were offering a house-to-house service to document all buildings and their inhabitants. Besides taking studio portraits, Merlin and his caravan travelled through the nearby towns, documenting the people, their houses, public buildings, and of course, mines and miners. At Hill End, Holtermann had met Henry Merlin and his young assistant, Charles Bayliss, and watched them at work. Holtermann was taken with Merlin's photographic craft and his entrepreneurial approach. The meeting was to have a significant effect on both of their lives. It was the coming together of a wealthy entrepreneur with ambitions for international marketing of his adopted country and a successful and ambitious photographer entrepreneur who was looking to expand his horizons and had the creative energy to do so. It was a meeting of their ideas and enthusiasms, with the delivery very much dependent on Merlin's skill and Holtermann's wealth and connections. With his sudden wealth, Holtermann commissioned Merlin and Bayliss to capture images of not only the goldfield towns but also the growth of Sydney. During the latter part of 1872 and early 1873, Merlin travelled through the towns close by Hill End, Bathurst and Orange, and those to the south, such as Yass and Goulburn, capturing images of industry, the towns and their people. Holtermann often would accompany him. They achieved extraordinary detail and quality with their 3,500 glass plate negatives, which lay forgotten in a Chatswood garden shed until they were rediscovered and donated to the Sydney Library in 1952. Holtermann commissioned Merlin to prepare photographs for the Holtermann International Travelling Exposition. Holtermann wished to do more for his adopted country, and he planned to show the world the successes of the colony, and through this to attract people to emigrate from England and European countries. Merlin was requested by Holtermann to deliver photographs in the largest format possible. Holtermann equipped Merlin with caravans to carry the larger 10-inch by 12-inch plate camera and darkrooms. Previously, Merlin had used this larger format for some of his landscape views around Sydney and studio portraits, as well as the Goldfield and travelling photos. Merlin moved the studio operations back to the rapidly expanding Hill End on a property owned by Holtermann and set up his staff to do the usual style photographs. Merlin successfully created a large composite panorama of the western slope of Hawkins Hill, which is now known as Merlin's Lookout. This complicated task, the making of a panorama, may have been the first major photographic entrepreneurial partnership that was undertaken by Holtermann with Merlin. In the autumn of 1873, Merlin and Holtermann were back in Sydney. It was here that Merlin broke the news that he was seriously ill and he was no longer able to work on Holtermann's project, but he did recommend his trusted assistant Charles Bayliss. In September 1873, at the age of only 43, Merlin died at his home in Leichhardt, Sydney. He'd contracted some form of inflammation of the lungs. It was quite possible that it was damaged due to the long hours in confined spaces with photographic chemicals. Charles Bayliss quickly moved into the job of assisting Holtermann, and it was Bayliss who suggested to Holtermann that the preferred format should be a mammoth plate, that is 18-inch by 22-inch. Holtermann agreed and took steps to supply Bayliss with the appropriate equipment. Holtermann was now one of Australia's wealthiest men. In 1874, he left the goldfields and moved to Sydney, first to a sprawling bungalow called St Leonard's Lodge in Crow's Nest, and then he built a mansion at Blues Point above Lavender Bay that had panoramic views across Sydney. The palatial home was completed with a tower embodying a stained glass window depicting him standing beside the Nugget. The mansion's ostentation was hard to ignore, and even rural newspapers carried descriptions of it as a residence fit for a nobleman and an architectural ornament to the locality which it is situated. After Bernhardt's death, the mansion was bought by Thomas Dibbs, owner of the neighbouring Graithwaite mansion, who then sold it to the newly established Sydney Church of England Grammar School, or Shaw School, and in the mid-1930s, 50 years after it was built, the house and the tower was encased in modern brickwork, and it was essentially demolished. Bayliss asked Bernhardt if he could take a photo of the view of Sydney from the tower of Holtermann's house. The house was not fully completed at this stage. Sitting some 27 metres above a ridge that was already well elevated, Holtermann's tower was a splendid vantage point from which to photograph Sydney and its harbour. In its tower, Holtermann had constructed a special temporary room in which he built a large camera. The result was a panorama that Holtermann claimed with some justification was the largest photograph in the world. On 2 single negatives, each over 5 foot by 3 foot, these were the largest photographs ever taken by wet plate or collodion process at the time, when the techniques of enlarging had not been developed. In 1875, Holtermann convinced the New South Wales government to include the Holtermann photographs in a photographic section at the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition. Later, they were also shown at the 1878 Paris Exposition Universelle Internationale, winning a silver medal. Holtermann's panorama was a brilliant marketing tool for the colony, not yet a century old. While there remain several examples of the panoramas, the finest remaining is now owned by the National Gallery of Victoria. Another set was mounted on a roll of cloth and taken by Holtermann to America and the continent, where they were exhibited in pleasure gardens and at special gatherings. The rolled-up example was taken to Europe, but sadly has not been traced. There had been reports of it being stored in buildings that were destroyed during the war. He returned from abroad with a number of agencies which he vigorously promoted. Holtermann seemed to have maintained his mining interests, employed a manager, as well as having other commercial ventures such as importing businesses and advertising the merits of Holtermann's life drops. He'd always been interested in medicine, and his life-preserving drops, compounded from a formula of a German doctor, were very popular. In 1879, Holtermann was given a special bay at the Sydney International Exhibition held at the Garden Palace. He included and acknowledged photographs by both Merlin and Bayliss, and Holtermann took photographs himself, being a keen amateur, a pioneer of the wet plate, as well as producing stereo photographs and more panoramas of Sydney. Around 1880, Holtermann tried unsuccessfully again to be elected to the New South Wales Parliament. After two earlier defeats, Holtermann, on the 5th of December 1882, was elected as a member for St Leonard's and a member of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly. Proclaiming himself as a man of indomitable energy and perseverance, the staunch friend of the working man, and an earnest supporter of every public movement having for its object the advancement of your electorate. His work in the New South Wales Parliament includes an unsuccessful attempt to establish a government ferry from Sydney to North Sydney, a scheme to encourage more German immigrants to Australia instead of America, as well as for the New South Wales government to fund more photographs of Sydney to assist the promotions of the colony. He attended Parliament regularly until 1885, being particularly interested in immigration and the progress of North Sydney, including the building of a North Shore Bridge, to which he was willing to contribute £5,000. Bernhardt died on his 47th birthday on the 29th of April 1885, after an 18-month illness, and he was buried at St Thomas's Cemetery and was survived by his wife, 3 sons and 2 daughters. He left an estate of £54,000, mostly in local land investments. Jake Cato said of him, Bernhardt Otto Holtermann can be ranked perhaps as Australia's first and greatest amateur of photography, using that word in its original French sense. He liked the art for its own sake, yet realised perhaps more than he knew its greatest documentary possibilities. He is chiefly remembered today by the vast collection of photographic plates that he sponsored and that his family preserved. Holtermann's legacy lives on in a street at Crow's Nest named after him. A little on his family. Bernard's wife, Harriet Emmett, was born in Gulgong, New South Wales in 1846. She married Bernard when she was 22 and Bernard 29. Harriet was the daughter of Edward Emmett and Harriet Scythes. Edward and Harriet were Irish, and they'd married in Wexford, Ireland in 1839 and had emigrated to New South Wales by 1842, where they settled in Bathurst, New South Wales. Harriet died on the 7th of July 1903 in North Sydney. Their surviving children, the first was Johanna Sophia Adelaide Holtermann, known as Sophie, who was born on the 7th of January 1869 at Bathurst, New South Wales. She married Ernest Arthur Poe Whitley at St Leonard's in 1893. They had no children. Ernest died in Japan in 1902, and Johanna died on the 6th of February 1950 at Mossman at the age of 82. The second child, Harriet Esther Delora Maria Holtermann, was born on the 27th of January 1873 at St Leonard's. She married John Stanton Sr. at Christchurch, North Sydney on the 6th of July 1895. John had been born in England and was a wool scourer. They had a daughter, Burl Blanche Sr. in Bathurst in 1898, and Harriet died on the 17th of February 1901 at Chatswood, aged only 28. The third child, Burlington Otto Holtermann, was born at sea near San Francisco, USA in 1876, no doubt when the family were going over for the exhibition. He died on the 27th of June 1897, aged only 21. And the death notice stated, Holtermann at Robland, Victoria Avenue, Chatswood, Burlington Otto in his 21st year, eldest son of the late B.O. Holtermann of North Sydney. The fourth child, Sydney Herman Oscar Holtermann, was born in 1879 at St Leonard's. He married Ada Griffiths at the Christchurch at Lavender Bay, North Sydney, on the 3rd of June 1903. And the article on the wedding stated, a pretty wedding was celebrated at Christchurch, Lavender Bay, North Sydney, when Miss Ada Griffiths, eldest daughter of Mr John Griffiths of Tongi Station, Cassilis, was married to Sydney H.O. Holtermann, eldest surviving son of the late Mr B.O. Holtermann of St Leonard's, North Sydney. Mr L.L.R. Holtermann, brother of the bridegroom, acted as best man. After the ceremony, refreshments were served at the Hotel Metropole. They had 5 children. Sydney was a tram conductor, and he died on the 13th of August 1956 in North Sydney, aged 77. The fifth child, St Leonard's Leichhardt Ratchford Holtermann, known as Len, was born in 1882 at St Leonard's. He married Mary Cecilia Ewing at Chatswood in October 1906. They had one son, Bernard. St Leonard's was a gentleman living by his own means in the census records, and he died at the age of 68 on the 15th of September 1950 at Chatswood, New South Wales. So all up, he had 7 grandchildren to continue on with the Holtermann line in Australia. And subscribe to hear the stories of Holtermann's partner, Ludwig Hugo Louis Byers, and also the story of Henry Boyfoy-Merlin, the photographer that Holtermann went into partnership with. Both have very interesting stories of their own. For as little as a coffee a month, $5 a month, you can subscribe and have access to nearly 30 bonus episodes.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.